Welcome back to the Brewing Class. I'm Ty Stevenson, your host and educator here at the Brewing Class. On the last episode, we talked about a little bit about myself in the introduction and how I feel worthy to give you guys the tools and information and knowledge you need to learn to become the best brewer possible and how to live a life in prosperity working with craft beer. Today, we're going to briefly go over the equipment. Today I'm going to be drinking this Yakima Valley IPA from San Miguel. It's one of the cheapest, best, medium-ish alcohols that you can find here where I live on the East Coast in Spain. I've been drinking a lot of these. Not a lot, but a decent amount. So first let's go over your equipment. You're going to need something to heat liquid up. So either gas or electric on the homebrew side to heat up roughly 5 to 10 gallons of wort for homebrewing. You're going to need something to collect that, which is called a kettle. It's called your brew kettle. Usually it's a big stainless steel pot. Sometimes it'll have a valve at the bottom, sometimes not. Next, you're going to need a mash tun if you're going to be doing all grain brewing, the harder version of brewing. This is something that you can use like an igloo cooler. You will need some sort of spout or valve at the bottom to get your runoff, your wort. You let I'll talk about the process in episode 5 or a couple more episodes over the next 2 weeks as I basically teach you guys how to homebrew right now over the next 2 weeks on this YouTube podcast here. So we talked about the kettle, big stainless steel pot, the mash tun. We talked about the heating elements. Next, you're going to be needing a fermenter, something like a plastic bucket back here to collect your wort to be added with yeast to produce beer. Wort is beer before it's fermented. And once that is done, you will be needing stuff for packaging. You can either use a stainless steel keg or some sort of keg with a CO2 canister and a CO2 pressure gauge, as well as CO2 hosing. It's a little bit more expensive to do that, but it's faster and typically produces better beer. If you don't do that, you're going to be doing bottle conditioned, secondary fermentation in the bottle. So on bottling day, which is usually roughly 2 weeks or a month or so for an ale, after you brew the beer, you will need, for 5-gallon batch, you'll need at least like 50 bottles of beer, 12-ounce bottles of beer. Ideally, they're brown, not clear or green. And you'll need the same amount of bottle caps. Then you're going to need a bottle capper. You're going to need Star San, which is a sanitizer solution, or iodine solution, some sort of sanitizer solution. And then you will need a auto siphon to pump it, and all the liquid will start to go. The bucket has to be up here, and the bottles have to be below it for the auto siphon to work properly. And then you fill your bottles, and you cap them, make sure everything's been sanitized. And then you let those sit for about 2 weeks. Now when you do that, you have to transfer from the fermenter into another bucket where you add sugar water. A little bit more sugar, well actually a decent amount of sugar, roughly 3.5 ounces of sugar with half a cup of water boiled. And you stir it, you mix it in with a beer to add more sugar for the yeast to re-ferment in the bottles to give you carbonated beer. And that's basically all the equipment you're going to need for brew day and bottle day. You will probably need some sort of mash paddle or a big spoon to stir the mash if you're doing all grain. If you're doing extract, you just need something like this. For me, this is my big kettle. Also, it's an all-in-one mash tun. So on the bottom, it has a false bottom and a bazooka tube to separate the grain from the liquid. And it has a ball valve at the bottom. And it can go up to boiling, or it can settle at a light simmer. This is how you brew. This is all the equipment. It's not too difficult. This thing cost me maybe $120. It's one of the cheapest things you'll find. Electric brew system. I used to have a propane brew system back in California. Spain is a little bit different, a little bit more harder to find good equipment here out in Europe. If you're living in America, you're pretty lucky. So if you guys have any other questions on what equipment you may need to start brewing beer, feel free to shoot me an email at brewer@thebrewingclass.com. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.